In 2023, you had the Red Bull RB20, one of the greatest Formula 1 cars of all time. Taking all but just one win over a record-long season, it was domination like you've never seen before. Anybody who watched any of the races last year knows that Red Bull were in an entirely different league. It was like watching Noah Lyles race your grandma. The power, the speed in a straight line, the reliability, the grip in the corners, the responsiveness, it was the complete package. It would grant Max his third title and 575 points to go along with it. It would also give Red Bull an insane 860 points, double that of Ferrari and Mercedes, and more than the entire rest of the grid combined. The Dutch national anthem was inevitable. But this year, things are a little bit different. This season has been incredible, one of the greatest Formula 1 seasons in recent memory with the obvious exception of 2021. We've had 7 different winners from 4 different teams, Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren, and Mercedes. But Red Bull, or should I say Max, hasn't won a race in the past 7 races, since all the way back at the Spanish Grand Prix. And after the disastrous performance that they had at Monza last weekend, they look like a proper midfield team. A midfield team that won the first 4 out of 5 races this season, with the only one that they lost being Australia, and that wasn't due to a lack of pace. Now, the car doesn't turn on a dime, it isn't responsive, it eats its tires, and whereas it used to just be Sergio who was struggling, now it's Max who can't seem to make the car do what he wants to either. What is going on with the RB20? How did Red Bull go from being one of the most dominant forces in Formula 1 history to losing by over 20 seconds not even 1 year later? Not even 6 months later? Well, it's a pretty tricky question because we don't exactly know what the problems are that are going on at Red Bull. And it doesn't seem like the team does either. We just know that there are problems. A lot of what you see online about Red Bull and about the RB20 is nothing but conjecture, but I think that we can piece together a pretty clear picture as to what's going on. Now, I think it's only fair that we start with this. Over the past couple of weeks, there's been a lot of talks about something that Red Bull may or may not have been doing. Cheating, bending the rules, a clever loophole. I'm not here to point any fingers or make any accusations, but this might just be the best explanation that we have as to why Red Bull have not even fallen off so fast, but they've actually seemed to have gone backwards. And it seems like it's all in the brakes. Something that you don't really think all that much about with race cars unless you're me. You don't hear a lot about the brakes, you don't hear a lot about brake problems, all the cars slow down the same generally. More specifically, this has to do with a little trick that Red Bull may have been implementing to help make it a little bit easier to get the car to turn into corners under braking. If we look at Article 11.1.2 of the Formula 1 technical regulations, it reads that the braking system must be designed so that within each circuit, the forces applied to the brake pads are the same magnitude and act as opposing pairs on a given brake disc. Basically, the rule states that the pressure being applied by the brakes needs to be the same on either side of the car. This is a rule that's been in Formula 1 since all the way back in 1998, banning asymmetric braking. Now this seems pretty black and white, doesn't it? It doesn't leave a whole lot of room open for interpretation. So it was a little strange when earlier this year the FIA announced a clarification to this rule when it seemed like there was no need for a clarification in the first place. The rule now is the same as it was before, except that they added a little something onto it. Now also stating that any system or mechanism which can produce systematically or intentionally asymmetric braking torques for a given axle is also forbidden. And after the FIA came out and made this clarification that asymmetric braking is in fact still not allowed, Red Bull's pace, well, it kind of fell off a cliff. But let's talk about what this system would do in Formula 1 in the first place. How would it help? Asymmetric braking, as the name implies, means that the braking forces being applied on the left or the right side of the car are not equal. Shocker. If you're turning the wheel into a corner, the car could apply more brake pressure to the inside wheels than the outside wheels. This could help significantly with, say, trail braking, where a driver slowly lets off the brake going into a corner. It could also help the car turn into corners faster, preventing understeer, which would also help save the tires because there would be less sliding. This is something that the RB19 was famously good at. And this is the system that Red Bull may have been running. Just at the beginning of this season, it looked on rails. It was perfect. It was responsive. Now it can't work the tires as well as it used to. It can't turn into corners as well as it used to. It understeers like mad. And overall, it just seems like a real handful to drive, regardless of the circuits. It's more than a little suspicious, the timing of it all. Now again, this is all conjecture. I'm not saying that Red Bull were doing this, that they weren't doing this. It could just all be a coincidence. Of course, Max as well as the team have been strongly denying ever having run an asymmetric braking system like this, but that doesn't really mean anything. Teams never come out and admit that they may or may not have been doing something that may be against the rules. But it has to be said that the FIA themselves have made it a point to mention that this clarification wasn't pointed at any one team. They say that this was just them trying to shut down what they might see as a potential gray area for the upcoming 2026 regulations. There were no protests from any other teams, no team principals calling out Red Bull in the media, none of the usual things that you see when a team is suspected of cheating. I mean, Zach Brown has been complaining about Red Bull for the past couple of months, but I don't think he's said anything specifically about the brakes. There's even suspicions that it wasn't only Red Bull who were doing something like this, and that McLaren and Mercedes were doing some funky business with their brakes too. But of course, like Aiden Millward said in his most recent video about this very topic, if a component is banned and a team has their car built around that component, it's going to hurt them a lot more. Same thing with Red Bull and the blown diffuser in 2011. If the blown diffuser got banned mid-season, it would hurt Red Bull the most because the car was built around the blown diffuser. That might be a similar situation to what we have right now. I don't blame people for thinking that this was aimed at Red Bull. It certainly would make a lot of sense. At the beginning of the season, they were looking as dominant as they have been for the better part of 3 years, and then they have a strange brake-related DNF in Australia, and all of a sudden the FIA comes out and says, hey, just so you know, asymmetric braking, still not allowed. And now when we look at the onboards of Max and Sergio, where are they having the greatest difficulties? They're struggling to get the car to turn into corners. They're struggling to get it to respond to inputs the way that it used to. They look exactly how you would expect them to look if these rumors about their brakes were true. This is something that Red Bull may have been taking advantage of for years up to this point. Possibly a key component of the Red Bull package, and only time will tell how this situation continues to develop over the remainder of the season, which I think will shed some light on the validity of these accusations from journalists and social media. That's that. I'll leave you to your own conclusions. Along with the brake drama that the team has been facing, there have been other issues with the RB20 also. One of those issues being the suspension, another key component, something that made the RB19 so good. If we look at Monaco, a track that Red Bull did particularly bad at this year, Max still managed to qualify 8.5 tenths faster than he did last year. But even with that added pace, it really seems like Red Bull is having a much harder time this season handling bumps and curbs the way that they used to. And this stability is just something that McLaren have really nailed down this year. Part of this may be due to issues that Red Bull seem to be having with correlation between how the car behaves in real life and how it behaves in the simulator. They're just having a hard time dialing in the setup as well as they used to. The car has also had some pretty significant balance issues between the front and the rear, something that Max has complained about to nauseam. And these hiccups may just be explained by Red Bull simply hitting the development ceiling of their initial concept. All of these problems, the instability, the brake issues, the balance issues, the tire wear issues, not being able to get the suspension dialed in to handle bumps and curbs well, are amplified, of course, by the rapid progression by teams like McLaren and Mercedes. McLaren, who now clearly have the fastest car and are also now favorites to win both championships at this point, have been bringing upgrade package after upgrade package, and they have been working well. It all started in Miami when they brought that huge aero package, and it worked perfectly, and it added heaps of performance, which coincided perfectly with Red Bull's first real signs of trouble. And then last weekend at Zandvoort, another huge upgrade package that added heaps of performance, as Red Bull continues to struggle in the low and medium speed corners.
Car doesn't turn at all in 10. Understood.
Mercedes have also been finding pace, winning 3 races this season. Rest in peace, Lewis Hamilton. So with Red Bull having the trouble that they've been having and the other teams finally getting a good grasp on the current regulation sets, it's no wonder why we have such a tight fight for the championship this year. Red Bull seem lost as to where to go with the development of the RB20. That same weekend in Zandvoort, when McLaren brought that huge upgrade package, Red Bull had Max running the original floor that they had at the beginning of the season, with Sergio running the new one. They also ran with a Monaco spec rear wing, which also explains why it was so easy for Lando to breeze right past on what's one of the shorter straights on the calendar. This difficulty coincides perfectly with nothing but drama in the Red Bull organization itself. Starting with all the controversy obviously around Christian Horner, Haas Verstappen, Max's dad saying either Horner goes or we go, that doesn't unite a team, and then you lose technical genius Adrian Newey, and then you lose sporting director Jonathan Wheatley. The team is kind of falling apart at the seams and has been filled with nothing but controversy throughout most of the 2024 season. So who knows what the atmosphere is like behind the scenes and at the factories. I can't imagine it's good. So as you can see, there's a lot of pieces to this. You have the rumors about the brakes, the drama within the team, the competition finally getting a grasp on the regulations and catching up and finding real pace, Red Bull hitting the development ceiling of the RB design. Only time will tell how the development of the RB20 continues throughout the remainder of the season. They still have a good car and they still have a good platform, it just seems like somebody pushed the puzzle off the table and it shattered into a million pieces and they can't quite figure out how to put it back. When I first wrote the script for this video, I had in my predictions that Red Bull were going to lose the Constructors Championship, but that Max was going to be able to eke out the Drivers Championship over Lando Norris. But after their performance at Monza, I don't know if I believe that to be the case. They're still leading both championships, but the way that things are looking right now, it's not going to stay that way for long. And with how hot the other teams are looking, McLaren in particular, they've got some work to do. But just like with Mercedes, you'd be foolish to count them out. Thank you for watching this video. I know that I haven't uploaded in a little while. I will see you on the next one.